Radio 97, it's law time. Time to talk law with our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay. She's with us every Thursday morning, brings along her textbooks, all her legal expertise, and provides some general advice on the latest hot topics. She has experience that spans more than 25 years in areas including property and commercial law. She also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation. With us once again. Morning to you, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Wayno. Good morning, Despina. Alrighty, Talking Law, segment 1. This one specifically for our Queensland friends. If you're born or raised or live in Queensland at the moment, you may have heard of SPER. So if you don't pay a fine, it usually does go to this company called SPER. It stands for State Penalties Enforcement Registry. And Despina, you've done a little research, and it turns out that SPER does have these crazy extensive powers that a lot of people might not actually know about. So take it away, blow us away with this information that you've now found about SPER.
Yes, well, it's not really great news, is it? I mean, it's informative, but it's probably something that people will get a bit disgruntled about and upset. But then again, what we're talking about really here is unpaid fines. Now, we're not going to go into the, I suppose, the arguments or the philosophy of should you have got the fine in the first place? What's the fine based on? And to be clear, we're not just talking about unpaid speeding fines, right? So we're talking about other things such as evading fares on public transport. Okay, and I'm not sure if people were aware that these extend to that. So everybody knows you don't pay a speeding fine, eventually it will get to SPER. It actually gets to SPER pretty quick these days, so I'm told. But if you go on a tram and you don't pay the fare, so you evade the fare that you should be paying, and if you use a taxi service and you evade the taxi fare, well, these laws will equally apply to you. So you really need to listen up, okay, and understand, as I have discovered recently, that these powers in Queensland are very extensive. Now, I'm not aware if they also exist in other states. We didn't look at that. But when you mentioned before the Palaszczuk government, so to be clear, this particular act, the State Penalties Enforcement Register Act, that came into force in 1999. So quite a few years ago. And since 99, there have been quite a few changes over the years. So one of the biggest changes was in 2017 by the Palaszczuk government. Yes. And those changes in 2017 really extended what we're talking about, enforcement powers. So if somebody has a fine, they don't pay it on time, it will go to SPER, who then enforces those unpaid fines, and they issue enforcement orders, okay, under that act. Now, those enforcement orders are very, very extensive. So let's go through exactly what they can do. And also understand when I'm telling you these particular powers this morning, these are powers and orders, I should call them, enforcement orders that can be obtained without having to take the person to court. Yeah. So people might think, oh, you know what, I just won't pay that fare, or I've forgotten about it, or I'll just toss the fine in the bottom drawer.
It'll just disappear. If I forget about it and put my fingers in my ears and go, it'll just go away. Yeah.
Exactly. And it doesn't work like that at all. And these enforcement orders are absolutely so wide. It's incredible. So when you get that enforcement order notice, I should say, it tells you all the options, and they're all done illustratively. So you can see at a glance, even if you can't read English, for example, read or speak English, they're done in little diagrams. So they've got diagrams of suspension of a driver's license. They've got clamping and seizing your vehicle, so immobilisation of your motor vehicle, deduction of wages from your account, from your bank account to pay that fine, and then issuing warrants, search and seizure, and selling property. So these are all very extensive, as you can, as you can imagine. So let's go through some of them. Suspension of driver's license, that speaks for itself, doesn't it? Okay, so you're going to get your driver's license suspended if you don't pay a fine, and it goes to SPER and there's an enforcement order against you, right? So that's one option they can take. And you won't know which option they will end up taking until, well, you know about it, because you will know, because it'll have an impact on you and your daily life, and you'll eventually hear about it. through the mail, perhaps, or maybe you'll get pulled over. I don't know. So suspension of driver's license. Now, your motor vehicle, now that can be immobilized, and they can actually, two things with that. They can get an immobilization search warrant, and they can get an immobilization device to place on your vehicle. So when we talk about immobilization search warrants, that sounds pretty scary, doesn't it?
Anytime you hear warrant, it's freaky.
Yeah, exactly. So what does that mean? So yes, they have the power to enter your premises. They have the power to search vehicles. They pull you over and say, yes, let's search your vehicle. I'm not really sure what they're searching for exactly in the vehicle, if they found the vehicle. And then they've got power to use reasonable help to actually put into place and search premises and search vehicles. So that's pretty extensive and very wide. So when they're looking for your vehicle, don't be fooled that you can simply garage it somewhere where you live and they'll never find it, right? So they've got these extensive powers to search your premises where they believe that that's where you reside permanently or occupy those premises permanently. So that's what it extends to. And if they find it, they can put an immobilization device on that vehicle for 14 days, up to 14 days. So you can't use your vehicle. And of course, if you think you're clever and you can get someone to try and lift that device off, well, that's not allowed. That's actually illegal. So you can't do that either. And they can, if they find your vehicle in a public place, naturally they can immobilize it then and there. If they find it at someone else's premises. So this is interesting. If you go and place your vehicle at someone else's house for a few weeks, right? If they reasonably believe that's where you've stored it, they can actually go and get a search warrant of those premises as well with the owner's consent. So they're very wide.
Yep. So if you haven't paid your fines, beware, they're coming for you. Now, what sort of fines are we talking about? I mean, you know, if you skip a $50 fine or something, are they're going to come looking for you then, or 200? I mean, what's the lower limit? When do you have to start worrying?
This is the crazy thing. So what I've been led to believe is that, for example, you go on a tram, right, public transport, and you don't pay the fare. Now, I'm not sure what the fare is at the moment on the Gold Coast, but I don't think it's you know, up to $50. It might be under $10. I'm not really sure, but it'd be a small amount compared to the fine, because the fine, as I understand, if you don't pay that particular fare, is actually something like $267.
It's a big jump.
So that's a big jump. And then if you don't pay it and it goes to SPER, SPER adds on a registration fee of around $75 for that particular fine, as an example, and then it goes up and up and up. So, you know, yes, you shouldn't evade fares. I totally agree with that. Of course, you shouldn't if it's a requirement and you have to do it at law. But be aware that if you do happen to even accidentally don't have your go-card on you, or you just forget to pay, really be aware of these extensive powers, because if you do happen to forget about it and you do get this order against you, I mean, having a search warrant to come into your premises and have the power to seize any property in your premises to sell, to pay off the fine, is pretty huge. And to also charge an interest in any land that you own in relation to unpaid fines, which is what they can also do, is huge. So obviously don't evade your fare. But if you happen to be in a situation where you can't pay your fare for whatever reason, right or wrong, I don't know if there's ever a right reason, but it might be just by accident, not intentional. Please be aware of these extensive powers that have been in place only for a few years in Queensland, thanks to our Queensland government.
Now, you mentioned that there were major changes made in the last 6 years or so, back in 2017. Did they give any justification for why they've made things pretty tough?
Well, what I understand from reading the history of SPER and the timeline and the changes was because there were so many unpaid fines that were just not being able to be collected. So SPER's resources were reached to the max, and then they overhauled the whole procedure of streamlining, apparently, the collection of these unpaid fines. And they obviously extended their powers to do so. So it makes sense in one way that you haven't got the resources to, you know, enforce and collect all these unpaid fines. How are you going to do it? Oh, we're going to extend all our powers and have a variety of options at our disposal.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't think it was actually really marketed to anybody, or nobody really knew when these changes came out, which is why I'm alerting people to these changes, because it came to my attention recently. Not because I evaded a fare, it's because a client of mine actually did. So it came to my knowledge that way. But yes, be aware they do exist and they are extensive. So pay the fine when you get the notice.
Definitely.
Sounds like good advice. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Despina. And coming up next, did you know you can transfer your interests in a property to a spouse with no stamp duty? That's coming up with Despina Priala.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.